Welcome back, everyone. Our next session is Trading in Travel, and to moderate this session, we have Mr. Ajay Bakaya, Managing Director, Sarovar Hotels and Resorts. Mr. Bakaya is joined on stage by Mr. Amitabh Khosla, Country Director, India in International Air Transport Association, Mr. Rajesh Magow, co-founder and Group CEO, Make My Trip, and Mr. Vikram Madhok, Managing Director, Abercrombie and Kent, India.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying back for this one. We got a lot of empty chairs up front, so if you want to move up, please feel free. I won't do any longer introductions. You've seen us jokers for far too long, and everyone pretty much knows everyone. From my limited prism, as I see things today, purely as a hotelier, largely in that mid-market space, it's full domestic flights, great business since February of this year. Resort locations in places like Kashmir, in places like Uttarakhand, in places like Himachal, doing business that they've never seen before. Rates that perhaps border sometimes on the ridiculous because the product doesn't justify the rate, but that's what we've been harvesting over the last year or so. International flights still expensive, visas still an issue in a lot of places. So domestic from the leisure point of view still in boom mode, and crowds at airports, etc., etc. The larger hotels in the bigger cities, 300 rooms, 400 rooms, 500 rooms, I'm not quite sure how well they're doing right now, but they were the ones who struggled the most through the pandemic. You gentlemen are looking at things through very different prisms. So I just want to check how you feel we are today. Vikram, let's start with you.
So let me preface this by saying I can see a lot of people missing. They're probably having coffee, Ajay, but we hope to see them back here. But let me preface by saying I think we have a lot of admiration for hoteliers. You guys have done ourselves extremely proud. When you talk about Indian hotels internationally, they say they are top of the line, and you guys make this really happen. So thank you very much. Let me share with you today. While of course the pandemic has done what it has done, and probably the ones that have been impacted the most down the food chain and continue to be impacted is the tourism industry, the travel trade, the DMC, the inbound operator, or the outbound operator. For all the multiple reasons Ajay just cited, we are grappling with all of this while we try to reboot. And of course, the silver lining I already shared with you is the hotels, and we're very happy that your business has, at least for the larger part at leisure hotels, has bounced back very nicely. A little State of the Union, or as far as Ajay and we kind of discussed as to what's happening. Globally, if you take the traditional source markets for India, the main markets being the United States, that has bounced back beautifully. The US market is absolutely buzzing across the world. Unfortunately, for India, we started and we opened our doors a little too late. And I think we shot ourselves in the foot, at least for season 2022. So, in terms of end of March, we announced that the borders will open, and they expect tour operators and travel agents to, to start to sell India. It doesn't work. There's a lead time of at least 6 to 9 months out. Similarly, international airlines, and today havoc in our friendly skies, both internationally and domestic. We are faced with very weak seat capacity, availability, both in and out of India. So both these have impacted inbound tourism and, of course, impacted the occupancies of hotels for luxury, leisure business. The second big market for, just to kind of give you Ajay, the second big market for India is the UK. And I think you're all very well aware that we have a big visa issue with the UK. And we are trying to push through WTTC, PATA, IATO, the Hotel Association, through all the means that we have to start to issue e-visas, because it's a big impediment today. India being very prominent in the UK, the Brits love to travel to India, and so on and so forth. Fortunately, the other markets, yes, they are taking a little longer to revive, whether it's France or it's Germany or it's Spain, but certain markets have come back nicely. Our order books are filling, so it's not all doom and gloom. 2023 can perhaps be a year where we can see far more joy. Back to you, Jay.
Thank you. So there's an interesting theory or thinking that came my way recently. And it says these visa problems for the European countries are not going to get better, because there is perhaps, and this is unofficial, an edict that says we don't want too many people coming in. We're going to have a rough winter with all the energy issues with the Russia-Ukraine situation, etc., etc. And if that be true, this is something that's we'll only know over time. If that be true, I think there's a great opportunity to have those people coming here into warmer climates if they're shivering and freezing in that part of the world. So perhaps an opportunity. Amitabh, away from the traditional hotels and into a very different segment, you're up in the sky. A very volatile, a very effervescent, a very evolving landscape or skyscape as far as India is concerned. You got an Air India, which will probably get better as time goes on. You got a Spice, which is a question mark. You got Akasa just on board. You have Jet, which may or may not revive. And of course, the international scenario is very different at the moment. How do you see things today, probably from an aviation perspective?
Thanks, Ajay. Thanks a lot for having us here, moderating this panel, and kicking it off. So, from an aviation perspective, couple of things, couple of points that I would like to make. One is that, of course, and that goes without saying, there are complementarities between the aviation industry as well as hospitality, and in fact, the entire travel and tourism ecosystem. So there is, what we do impacts how the entire value chain runs. So there's that bit, which is that we are all a part of a bigger travel tourism fraternity. IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association, it undertakes this long-term passenger forecast, which we keep on updating as well as we go along. So leave aside what's happened in the last couple of years with the decimation of traffic, travel and traffic over the last 2 years. But the big positive, which I think is a good one to highlight and to focus on, is that the IATA long-term passenger forecast reveals that India would be the third largest aviation market in the world. That's both with domestic as well as international travel. The forecast was for it to come alive by around 2025, but I think with all of whatever's happened in the last couple of years, I think this would go forward a bit. But the long-term trajectory, there is no denying that India will be the third largest aviation market in the world for the foreseeable future. It'll stay behind China and the US into our 20-year time horizon. And it's also, so it's not just India standalone, but this entire region, Asia Pacific, out of our top 10 markets globally, 5 of those are from the Asia Pacific region. So there's China, there is India, Indonesia, Thailand, and Japan. So this region itself is the fastest growing region in the aviation ecosystem, in the travel and tourism space. So whatever comes with growth, I think India is greatly placed in terms of benefiting from that. There is a whole lot which is happening within the aviation ecosystem within India as well, and I think you've highlighted. So a stronger Air India makes for, it's a great, helps the entire ecosystem to bring in, to connect us into longer haul destinations. So a stronger Air India, I think, is a great one, which will do great for this industry. But also, I think we see a lot of changes happening on the international front. So in the last 2 years, where travel, and flights were totally grounded, but there's been research, restart, and the entire ecosystem has, resurrected. It's come together differently. And I think some of it is very interesting from when you look at international network and connections of India to the rest of the world. So there is, whether we are, Delhi is connected to Warsaw, Delhi is connected to Montreal direct, which many of the others in Asia Pacific are not. So I think how it shapes up for travel flows and getting traffic to pass through, centers and stronger gateway airports in India, I think that would be something to watch out for, and perhaps, something for the hospitality and travel and tourism to consider as well.
Sounds good. So, third largest growing aviation market in the world, the 6th largest economy in the world. It looks like a good platform. I am confounded by the fact that since about February of this year, we've seen high inflation in India, we've seen expensive air tickets in India and overseas. At the same time, we've seen chock-a-block aircraft seats, we've seen hotels full up and charging beyond they've charged before. Rajesh, can you try and explain that situation? You're a lot closer to the customers who are filling up our hotels and the airline seats. How is it that the cracks haven't happened yet?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, by the way. Actually, when you look at it, maybe, break the industry into different segments, sometimes you will get the impression that it's not really impacting. But let me tell you, a few data points where clearly, like a high fares of, which was thanks to the fuel cost, were clearly impacting more the international travel. And, as Vikram was also trying to highlight, it's definitely one of the biggest reasons that we've seen, which is directly linked to the cost linked inflation. When that happens, fares go up. And when the fares go up, the discretionary spend definitely comes down. We've seen it over the years, and it did impact. And therefore, if you really see, when we look at, and we are seeing all kind of data points, as you also mentioned some of them, and Amitabh also mentioned. So when you look at domestic market, the recovery might be about, I would say about 90%. So in the 90s. In the hospitality segment, domestic market, premium segment, you would say probably we've crossed 120, 30% as well. But part of that, as we all know, is because of the ARRs, right? How sustainable those ARRs are, we will see. But if you look at mid-segment, you look at long-haul international, you look at even mid-haul international, across the board international, it's only about 65, 70%. So, as compared to pre-pandemic. So where on one side, you have a situation where the sentiment is very positive. The demand sentiment is very, very strong, very, very positive. That's really the great news. And we did recent survey. I'll tell you some more data points, very interesting data points, very interesting insights that we got from our sort of customer base. As we were asking right sort of questions on the demand related questions, the insights came back, 80% of the people today, and this is about today, what happens in future we will see, 80% of the people want to spend more, travel more, and experiment more. Like 70 to 80% of the people. That's really the sentiment. So that's great news, but The moment when it comes to then weighing the options between, because of the inflation, looking at the fares, actual demand, translating the sentiment into actual demand, it does play a role. So in certain segments, we clearly see immediately, you will see fares going up and we will see demand going down. Immediate impact that happens because of that. So I don't think we should completely sort of ignore this inflation issue. Globally, much more stronger. Seems like India, it is coming down. And I guess the better news also is that on cost side, fuel costs have started to come down as well.
Great. We're going to talk a little bit more on whether we've learned any lessons or whether any habits have changed due to what we went through in the pandemic. Meher, if you can put up the first question so we can also get our audience involved. But really, we went through 2 years of absolute disaster. The whole world, not just us or hospitality, but the whole world. We're also going through the biggest possible natural disasters the world has ever seen, and they're going to get worse and worse and worse. Have we, as humankind, learned any lessons? So is there anything to take away from that COVID which becomes a part of our habit now, which wasn't part of the habit earlier? Vikram, anything in terms of your customer experience, etc.? I was talking to Deepak, who's not here today. He had to pull out Deepak there, but he said to me, everything's going to get back to the same old stuff. We haven't learned anything. But what are your thoughts?
So I think eventually it just might get back to the same old stuff. But for now, people are selecting destinations where they feel that they're going to be very safe, very secure. And hence, when I said, whether it's the North Americans or the Europeans, they pretty much are staying close to home, somewhere along the UNWTO reports. And of course, to reiterate what Rajesh or Amitabh mentioned, there's huge demand for India. There's going to be a huge pent-up demand for India, not in 2022, but in 2023, once everything settles down in terms of flights, availability, all this inertia. Actually, a lot of disruption has taken place because today, high-end Indians who you typically would travel out are now traveling and consuming luxury hotels in India. But otherwise, traditionally, during this time, during all the various holidays, now long weekends, whether it's the Maldives or it's anywhere around India or long haul, they would travel out. Another big impediment for them has been the visa story. So forget all that. So safety security is perhaps the biggest issue today for a high-end traveler. He's very concerned. He's going to stay in a high-quality hotel. God forbid something was to happen. At least there's some recourse. People like us, it's our place under the sun. All tour operators and self-respecting travel partners, they are starting to gravitate towards them. Of course, they also go to the intermediaries. So I'm not discounting that they will not go to a Make My Trip or a Yatra or et cetera, et cetera. But having said that, especially if you're long-haul travelers, they would like to engage with people who have been in business for a number of years, who have actually survived the pandemic, who've actually stood the test of time. So I think that's really one of the key ones of safety, security, and so on and so forth. And that's where the destination perception comes into play. And that's where we perhaps are also dropping the ball, and the Ministry of Tourism and everybody knows it today. We are absolutely missing, MIA, in the international media. Nobody, there's not a squeak, a pip about India, be it digital, be it print, be it, tour operating, road shows, et cetera, completely gone. And hence, we will miss out because everybody and his brothers is vying for that wallet of international traveler.
Thanks. Safety, security. I'm going to come back to that one in just a minute. We have, and thanks to Manav and Hosi, we have technology on our side. So there's a question on the screen, whatever screen is closest to you. which says with video calls cut down domestic travel in 2023 compared to 2019 by 0 or 25% or 50% or 75%. So I believe there is a system where you can vote, and a lot of people have. Please do so. We try to figure out what you guys think. But going back to the big one on safety and security, Rajesh, picking up from there, and the audience here is largely hotels, would that mean better things for branded hotels versus non-branded ones? Would that mean better things for upscale Make My Trips or upscale Airbnbs or fancy villas in Goa and wherever versus conventional hotel rooms? How do you see that panning out?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. In fact, incidentally, yesterday we were at an event which was a homestay event as well. So that is a category that just from a consumer behavior standpoint, thanks to pandemic, in fact, I mean, it started sort of pre-pandemic, but thanks to pandemic, started to accelerate in terms of consumers picking up those kind of accommodations. One of the reasons was the safety, security. The other actually big reason, and I think going forward, that is going to be the more and a bigger reason, is going to be more and more experimentation rather than only thinking about safety and security. If we really, talk about, I know it's right now top of our mind, safety and security. Maybe 2 quarters ago, it was even bigger on our mind. But if you really see now, and look at this hall, for example, I don't know what kind of safety security are we talking about. No masks, right? And I just came from an overseas trip, and I was just sharing it with you all. Just before, there's not even one single soul that I saw that was wearing mask. So people have moved on, and public memory is so short. Maybe it's human psychology that we actually want to forget the bad things real fast, right? And it's happened. It's happening already. We were talking about US market for the longest time. People have moved on, and even if people are getting impacted a little bit right now, I feel that it's a regular flu and so on. So I am not sure. I think in general, we should take that learning from, let's say, hoteliers' standpoint. When we look at service levels, we should definitely see that from that point of view and raise the bar, because that is one area that I do think, over the last couple of years, given that we were like resource crunch, talent crunched and so on and so forth, the service levels have taken a beating. And that is not long-term sustainable. So if there is any area that you don't want to cut cost, is that area. And within that, if you want to bring up the element of safety and hygiene, by all means, you should do that. Because those are actually real good things across the segments, not necessarily only for premium segment and not necessarily for the mid segment. Because that, I think, is very core and fundamental, very close to in-state sort of experience, which I think every GM in the hotel should think more and more about it, because it gives you more repeat, it gives you real good experience. I also say this because, in India, unfortunately, in some areas, it's getting better and better, and in future it'll get even better. Sometimes the commuting experience, the approach experience, etc., is not that great. So what people look forward to is the in-stay experience. And if the in-stay experience is also bad, for one reason or the other, then I'm afraid we are going to lose this whole demand sentiment to the overseas destinations, because the experience is a lot better there, right? I mean, even the overall experience, whether it is a commuting experience, reaching there, activities experience, in-stay experience, and so on. So I would actually take this more from that perspective, but not necessarily get paranoid about it, because public memory is absolutely short. It is, I think, over the years has proven. Time and again.
So experiential, proactive, out of the box, different, new, informative, plenty of options to choose from, versus the typical cookie cutter that we've lived on for a long time. I think that picture is quite clear.
Absolutely.
If one has to survive. Our audience poll here, and I think it's a very optimistic bunch of hoteliers. We're always eternally optimistic. Says that your video calls and Zoom calls and Google Team meetings and all those things will only cut down domestic travel by either nothing or 25%.
I actually want to know who are their 3%. The pessimistic 3%.
I hope you're wrong. Meher just put up the second question meanwhile. So Amitabh, does your data suggest anything different? Your data, your research, or what IATA is going through in terms of where we are today and how things are panning out?
So I think how it's impacted the airline industry, which is the total stoppage of traffic, which this industry had never witnessed earlier, to a graded restart, to now I think everybody vying for seats. So it's the industry started to live with frequent changes in rules, guidelines, and changing. In fact, there is a service that we provide for our member airlines, which tracks what are the visa, health, quarantine, masking, and all those rule requirements at destinations. So at the peak of the pandemic period, we were seeing across the entire ecosystem around 200 changes on every single day. So I think through all of this, the airlines have started to be more agile and started to deploy, leverage IT, digital, contactless, pre-airport, check-in processes completed. And so there is a whole lot more digital familiarity with the passenger base, which has come about. So which is great, and I don't think that will go away because, I mean, it really, just like, the Zoom calls and everything else, it really needed that impetus that the pandemic has provided to that shift to more digital, more usage of IT for running the business. So that's great, and I think that will stay on for sure. A couple of other themes which are there. One is, and it's not being recognized yet in India, but I guess if you see Europe, Greta Thunberg, or all of the other activists, so there is a bit on sustainability which is going to hit this industry. It is about, are you able to offset your carbons that you're emitting through your travel? India's got these new rules which have come about on single-use plastic, so how does that impact the travel in onboard experience and things like those. So sustainability, carbon emissions, being able to offset, plastic usage, etc. All of those are, I think, themes which need to be addressed. And I guess it might not stay with the aviation side, but it will be the whole ecosystem that has to
play a role in people's decision making on hotels and accommodation. Very good. I think that's good for the country and good for all of us. Now, the audience is largely of people like me who do their annual budgets for owners or companies, and through places like Kashmirs, the Mashobras, the Shimlas, the Palampurs, other places in Uttarakhand, etc., owners and us have been smiling the last few months, laughing away, saying everything's fantastic. Till one fine day, an owner came back to me and said, "Oh, next year we'll do 30% more," and I started smiling because it's unlikely to pan out that way. But people have got so used to destinations with very little inventory. Your Rishikesh, for example, rooms that would otherwise sell, let's say, hypothetically 10,000, selling for 40,000. And do they deserve that price? No. Are we guys complaining as hoteliers? No. The money is coming in, we're taking it in. But will it last? So if I were to see what the audience is saying here, they're saying, most people are saying that both rates and occupancies will drop, and some are saying that occupancies will definitely drop. So this is more an exercise keeping in mind the budgets for next year. But have the good times in these places gone? How are we looking in the next few years? Rajay, come back to you again because I think you're closest to the ball on this one.
Yeah, sure. No, I think outlook also looks promising, right? I mean, long-term outlook again, Amitabh shared, and if I look at it just at the country level, let's say not necessarily only 2 years or 5 or 10, or maybe in fact India is talking about now Vision 2047 and so on. But if you really look at it from a longer-term perspective, I think the outlook specifically for India as compared to the rest of the world is very, very positive. And there are 2 or 3 big fundamental reasons for that. One, of course, the GDP growth rate that we are seeing. I think, you compare with any country in the world, despite all those constraints, issues, macro issues, pandemic and the rest of it, as we are bouncing back at a growth rate of much, much higher than the rest of the world. The situation with, let's say, Russia and Ukraine have different sort of implication on us, but look at China, where China is happening. If China was going through huge amount of sort of growth boom in the past couple of decades, now going through the down cycle is only going to help us. That's definitely another big reason in terms of more capital infusion, in terms of more people converging, looking at India as an investment destination. We have seen the flood of capital that has been flowing into the country, and there may be a temporary sort of slowdown on that. I think it's just very temporary in nature. It'll come back. India's commitment to invest in infrastructure, and we all want more and more always on that. And, the pace we want that it should just continue to keep investing on infrastructure. Expectation is a lot more, but the reality also is that there has been commitment and there has been more and more investment that's going on in the infrastructure. The disposable income, because of all this growth overall, because that's really drives the demand, right? If you start comparing it with our per capita income with, let's say, China, I think we have a very good opportunity now, leapfrog that in the next 10 years, 20 years, for us to be able to improve that per capita income significantly, and that's going to sort of help the demand side significantly as well. So these are like macro 3 or 4 fundamental reasons why I think the outlook is really positive. I just wanted to make one comment, sorry, with your permission, Ajay.
Sure.
On the previous one. As Amitabh was sharing, I couldn't agree more with the sustainability becoming a very, very important issue from future if you start looking at for our sector for the long-term standpoint, as against, by the way, these Zoom issues and all of that. If that was true, then Zoom stock wouldn't be crashing. Right? So that's already crashed, by the way. So these are the temporary issues. Yes, there will be long-haul, low-impact meetings, travel would stop. But none of the other travel, by the way, is going to. So domestic travel, I gave you the number, it's already 95%. So if that was true, that, immediately right now, top of the mind, I can do all the meetings on Zoom, it's not happening. So I don't think that's a very temporary phenomena. That is just optimization sort of thing. But long term, I don't think that has any impact.
So I'll throw a couple of more things into the pot for the moment. And I'm no political expert. But I think the China situation is going to change after November. The President Xi Jinping is waiting to be elected in November as the big time leader for life for China, on the same lines as Putin in Russia, and their thinking from what one hears from within China is, don't cause any ripples at the moment. Let November pass. Before that, there's a problem. Shut the damn town down. Don't do anything. So as much as the West are trying to be provocative and needling them a little bit here, they're staying very calm and very gentle, but they may change their stance after November. And it's widely expected that he be elected leader for life. Secondly, on the India scenario, while India is undoubtedly in a positive mode, with the level of inflation that we have, with the people at the bottom end of the pyramid are going to have less and less and less for some time. Jobs are not exactly in abundance, and the lower end of the mid market, which developed so well through the 90s to the 2000s and until the pandemic happened, were growing. Those people at the bottom end had a little bit more disposable stuff, more for themselves. So that might cause some social unrest. But anyways, that's for us to see. Vikram, the next 5 years, how do you see India, hospitality, aviation, geopolitics?
I think it's going to be our place under the sun. I think it's going to be very positive, and I think Rajesh just mentioned we currently total tourism. So if everybody understands that is incoming and outgoing. Before the world came to a standstill was roughly about 30, 33, 32, 34 million, which is 10.5 million inbound and 2 times that amount outbound. I think, again, UN, WTO, WTTC, PATA have all made predictions for this region. And they say in the next, if you take the base year 2019, if we are lucky, we'll get about 40% recovery in 2022, 35 to 40%. In 2023, if we actually get 85% of the business in 2023, that'll be great. But from there on, our growth story will begin. And we anticipate in 2024, we should have about 13.5 million incoming travelers. Outgoing should be to the tune of about 27, 28 million. There are also big numbers being bandied around for people traveling outbound because all this pent-up demand, so on and so forth. It doesn't impact you so much, but it does in one way or the other, because then correspondingly, domestic tourism kind of comes down. People take their marketing dollars and go overseas. So yes, the growth story is intact. We just of course need to have go back in the face of the customer, whether we do it independently or we do it with the government. But it has to happen. It has to happen very quickly.
So Amitabh, we've got some questions on the screen there from the audience, and if you have any other questions, please raise your hand the good old-fashioned way, and we'll respond. But would you want to take any of these and reply to a very active Alan DeMello and a couple of anonymous people?
Not exactly on the question asked, but I think just on the word demographics. But I think one to highlight, which once again not recognized well enough in India, but coming our way later on, and important from tapping an international customer base, market base, is a globally aging population. So what does it mean to be able to provide for accessibility, and just the ability for caring for an aging, the mobility through the entire journey for an aging population, I think would be a demographic, a segment that we need to cater for, as not just as aviation or hospitality, but the entire ecosystem.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Somebody talked about 2047. In 2047, India is going to be a much older population. People coming into our hotels are going to be a lot older than what they are today, and issues of security, safety, etc., medical health would become significant issues.
I can give you some data point on the demographics, at least on our platform that we see. The average age, and obviously there will be extremes on both sides. So about 24 to 40, 41, 42 is the kind of age that we see who book and travel. There's not very difference between the two.
Vikram, please.
I can take a crack at the first one, but why is India perceived as a cheap destination? It's not perceived as a cheap destination, but if you are going and spending your marketing dollars in countries where their expectations about India are a little differently, hence if you talk about Sri Lanka, which is actually supposed to be our #1 biggest inbound destination, or you talk about certain Asian countries, their perception on India is the way it is. But today, let me tell you, in the West, most people, when they travel to India today, it's no longer a cheap or I wouldn't say cheap, inexpensive destination, because of course, we do luxury high-end travel, but across the board today, what used to be $150 per person per night kind of a travel or a trip to India no longer exists. I mean, you actually spend much more. Again, it all depends it's specific market to market. Talking about demographics and at least demographics for people, it all depends where you're coming from. If you're coming from a long-haul destination, if you're talking about the Americas or North Americas, you have much You have an older demographic, psychographic, people who have more money, who have more time, et cetera, et cetera. But if you have a European market coming in, you see younger people. So it is both. It's not just specifically, but by and large, India is a bucket list kind of travel. After they've seen a lot of part of the world, they talk about India. And that's because India is very experientially based. Everything about India is experiential. From the moment you arrive in Delhi or Bombay or Calcutta, wherever you arrive, it's experiences. I don't say it's good or bad, but the experiences start from there. And of course, when they get to the hotel, the experiences get totally highlighted. I mean, beautiful experiences because you have lovely hotels.
Well, I'll say two things to you. One will put you at ease a little bit, and the other one will put you into a bit of panic. The first one is, if you're not from Gurgaon, you're heading towards Delhi, whether you leave now or 8 o'clock in the evening, you're just going to be sitting in the traffic, so don't be in a rush, guys. It's okay. And the second one is from my friend Pathu Keswani. We were discussing a few days ago. Room rates in hotels in India are 30% below what they were in 2007. Forget 19 and the pandemic. From 2007 to 2022, in 15 years, the rates are 30% lower. Inflation impact is 100%. So we're actually sitting at 60% lower rates than we were doing in 2007. And I hope that changes in the next 15 years, or the next year or two or three. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being such an interesting, inspiring audience. Thank you.
Thank you.